Chapter 2 The Science of Deduction We met next day, as he had arranged, and inspected the rooms at number 221B Baker Street, of which he had spoken at our meeting. They consisted of a couple of comfortable bedrooms, and a single large, airy sitting room, cheerfully furnished and illuminated by two broad windows. So desirable in every way were the apartments, and so moderate did the terms seem, when divided between us, that the bargain was concluded on the spot, and we at once entered into possession. That very evening I moved my things round from the hotel, and on the following morning Sherlock Holmes followed me with several boxes and portmanteaus. For a day or two we were busily employed in unpacking and laying out our property to the best advantage. That done, we gradually began to settle down and to accommodate ourselves to our new surroundings. Holmes was certainly not a difficult man to live with. He was quiet in his ways, and his habits were regular. It was rare for him to be up after 10 at night, and he had invariably breakfasted and gone out before I rose in the morning. Sometimes he spent his day at the chemical laboratory, sometimes in the dissecting rooms, and occasionally in long walks, which appeared to take him into the lowest portions of the city. Nothing could exceed his energy when the working fit was upon him, but now and again a recreation would seize him, and for days on end he would lie upon the sofa in the sitting-room, hardly uttering a word or moving a muscle from morning to night. On these occasions I noticed such a dreamy, vacant expression in his eyes that I might have suspected him being addicted to the use of some narcotic, had not the temperance and cleanliness of his whole life forbidden such a notion. As the weeks went by, my interest in him and my curiosity as to his aims in life gradually deepened and increased. His very person and appearance were such as to strike the attention of the most casual observer. His height, he was rather over 6 feet, and so exceedingly lean that he seemed considerably taller. His eyes were sharp and piercing, save during those intervals of torpor which I have alluded, and his thin, hawk-like nose gave his whole expression an air of alertness and decision. His chin, too, had the prominence and squareness which mark the man of determination. His hands were invariably blotted with ink and stained with chemicals, yet he was possessed of extraordinary delicacy of touch, as I frequently had occasion to observe when I watched him manipulating his fragile philosophical instruments. The reader may set me down as a hopeless busybody when I confess how much this man stimulated my curiosity, how often I endeavored to break through the reticence which he showed on all that concerned himself. Before pronouncing judgment, however, be it remembered how objectless was my life, and how little there was to engage my attention. My health forbade me from venturing out unless the weather was exceptionally genial, and I had no friends who would call upon me and break the monotony of my daily existence. Under these circumstances, I eagerly hailed the little mystery which hung before me, which was my companion, and spent much of my time in endeavoring to unravel it. He was not studying medicine. He had himself, in reply to a question, confirmed Sandford's opinion on that point. Neither did he appear to have pursued any course of reading which might fit him for a degree in science, or any other organized portal which would give him entrance into the learned world. Yet his zeal for certain studies was remarkable, and within the eccentric limits of his knowledge was so extraordinarily ample and minute in his observations, it fairly astounded me. Surely no man would work so hard or attain such precise information unless he had some definite end in view. Desultory readers are seldom remarkable for the exactness of their learning. No man burdens his mind with small matters unless he has some very good reason for doing so. His ignorance was as remarkable as his knowledge. Of contemporary literature, philosophy, and politics he appeared to know next to nothing. Upon my quoting of Thomas Carlyle, he inquired in the naivest way who he might be, and what he had done. My surprise reached a climax, however, when I found incidentally that he was ignorant of the Copernican theory of the composition of the solar system. That any civilized human being in this 19th century should not be aware that the earth traveled around the sun appeared to me to be such an extraordinary fact that I could hardly realize it. "You appear to be astounded," he said, smiling at my expression of surprise, "that I do not know it shall do my best to forget it." "To forget it?" "You see," he explained, "I consider that a man's brain originally is like a little empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. A fool takes in all the lumber of every sort that he comes across, so that the knowledge which might be useful to him gets crowded out, or at the best is jumbled up with a lot of other things, so that he has difficulty in laying his hands upon it. Now the skilful workman is very careful indeed as to what he takes into his brain attic. He will have nothing but the tools which may help him in the doing of his work, but these he has a large assortment, and in all the most perfect order. It is a mistake to think that the little room has elastic walls that can distend to any extent. Depend upon it, there comes a time when for every addition of knowledge you forget something that you knew before. It is of the highest importance, therefore, to not have useless facts elbowing out of the useful ones." "Oh, but the solar system!" I protested. "What the deuce is it to me?" he interrupted impatiently. "You say that we go round the sun. If we went round the moon, it would not make a pennyworth of difference to me or my work." I was on the point of asking him what that work might be, but something in his manner showed me that the question would be an unwelcome one. I pondered over our short conversation, however, and endeavored to draw my deductions from it. He said he would acquire no knowledge which did not bear upon his object. Therefore, all the knowledge which he possessed was such as would be useful to him. I enumerated in my own mind all the various points upon which he had shown me that he was exceptionally well informed. I even took a pencil and jotted them down. I could not help smiling at the document when I had completed it. It ran something like this: Sherlock Holmes, his limits. 1. Philosophy of literature, nil. 2. Philosophy, nil. 3. Astronomy, nil. 4. Politics, feeble. 5. Botany, variable. Well up in belladonna, opium, and poisons generally. Knows nothing of practical gardening. 6. Knowledge of geology, practical but limited. Tells at a glance different soils from each other. After walks, has shown me splashes upon his trousers, and told me by their color and consistency in which part of London he had received them. 7. Knowledge of chemistry, profound. 8. Knowledge of anatomy, accurate, but unsystemic. 9. Knowledge of sensational literature, immense. He appears to know every detail of every horror perpetrated in the century. 10. Plays the violin well. 11. Is an expert single-stick player, boxer, and swordsman. 12. Has good practical knowledge of British law. When I had got so far in my list, I threw it upon the fire in despair. If I can only find what the fellow is driving at by reconciling all these accomplishments, and discovering a calling which needs them all, I said to myself, I may as well give up the attempt at once. I see that I alluded above to his powers upon the violin. They were remarkable, but as eccentric as his other accomplishments. That he could play pieces, and difficult pieces, I knew well, because at my request he played me some of Mendelssohn's Lieder and other favorites. When left to himself, however, he would seldom produce any music, or attempt any recognized air. Leaning back in his armchair of an evening, he would close his eyes and scrape carelessly at the fiddle which was thrown across his knee. Sometimes the chords were sonorous and melancholy. Occasionally they were frantic and cheerful. Clearly they reflected the thoughts which possessed him, but whether the music aided those thoughts, or were instead possessed by him, who knows? It was more than I could determine. I might have rebelled against these exasperating solos, had it not been that he usually terminated them by playing in quick succession a whole series of my favorite airs, as a slight compensation for the trials upon my patience. During the first week or so we had no callers, and I had begun to think that my companion was as friendless as I was myself. Presently, however, I found that he had many acquaintances, and those in the most different classes of society. There was one little fellow, rat-faced, dark-eyed fellow, who was introduced to me as Mr. Lestrade, who came 3 or 4 times in a single week. One morning a young girl called, fashionably dressed, stayed for an hour or more. The same afternoon brought a gray-haired, seedy visitor, looked like a Jew peddler, who appeared to be much more excited, and was closely followed by a slipshod elderly woman. On another occasion, an old white-haired gentleman had an interview with my companion, and on another, a railway porter in his velveteen uniform. When any of these nondescript individuals put in an appearance, Sherlock Holmes used to beg for the use of the sitting-room, and I would retire to my bedroom. He always apologized for putting me to this inconvenience. "I have to use this room as a place of business," he said, "and these people are my clients." Again I had an opportunity of asking him a point-blank question, and again my delicacy prevented me from forcing another man to confide in me. I imagined at the time he had some strong reason for not alluding to it, but he soon dispelled the idea by coming round to the subject of his own accord. It was upon the 4th of March, as I have a good reason to remember, that I rose somewhat earlier than usual, and found that Sherlock Holmes had not finished his breakfast. The landlady had become so accustomed to my late habits that the place had not been laid, nor my coffee prepared. With the unreasonable petulance of mankind, I rang the bell and gave a curt intimation that I was ready, and then I picked up a magazine from the table and attempted to while away the time with it, while my companion munched silently at his toast. One of the articles had a pencil mark at the heading, and I naturally began to run my eye through it. It was a somewhat ambitious title. It was The Book of Life, and it attempted to show how a much more observant man might learn by an accurate and systematic examination of all that came by his way. It struck me as being a remarkable mixture of shrewdness and of absurdity. The reasoning was close and intense, but the deductions appeared to be far-fetched and exaggerated. The writer claimed by a momentary expression, a twitch of a muscle or the glance of an eye, to fathom a man's inmost thoughts. Deceit, according to him, was an impossibility in the case of one trained to observation and analysis. His conclusions were as infallible as so many propositions of Euclid. So startling would his results appear to the uninitiated, that until they learned the process by which he had arrived at them, they might as well have considered him a necromancer. "From the drop of water," said the writer, "a logician could infer the possibilities of an Atlantic or a Niagara, without having seen or heard of one another. So all life is a great chain, the nature of which is known whether we are shown a single link of it all. Like all other arts, the science of deduction and analysis is one which can only be acquired by long and patient study. Nor is life long enough to allow any mortal to attain the highest possible perfection in it. Before turning to those moral and mental aspects of the matter which present the greatest difficulties, let the inquirer begin by mastering more elementary problems. Let him meet upon a fellow mortal, learn at a glance to distinguish the history of the man, the trade or profession to which he belongs. Puerile as such an exercise may seem, it sharpens the faculties of observation, and teaches one where to look, and what to look for. By a man's finger-nails, his coat-sleeve, by his boots and trouser-knees, by the callosities of his forefinger and thumb, by his expression and shirt-cuffs, by each of these things a man's calling is plainly revealed. That all united should fail to enlighten the competent inquirer in any case is most inconceivable." "Oh, what insufferable twaddle!" I cried, slapping the magazine down on the table. "I have never read such rubbish in my life." "What is that?" asked Sherlock Holmes. "Why, this article," I said, pointing with my egg-spoon, as I sat down to my breakfast. "I see that you have read it since you marked it. I don't deny that it is smartly written. It irritates me, though. It is evidently the theory of some arm-chair lounger who evolves all these neat little paradoxes in the seclusion of his own study. It is not practical. I should like to see him clapped down by a third-class carriage on the Underground, and asked to give the trades of all of his fellow-travellers. I would lay 1,000 to 1 against him." "You would lose your money," Holmes remarked calmly. "As for the article, I wrote it myself." "You?" "Yes, I have a turn for both observation and deduction. The theories which I have expressed there, and which appear to you to be so chimerical, are really extremely practical, so practical I depend upon them for my bread and cheese." "And how?" I asked involuntarily. "Well, I have a trade of my own. I suppose I am the only one in the world. I am a consulting detective, if you can understand what that is. Here in London we have lots of government detectives, lots of private ones. When these fellows are at fault, they come to me, and I manage to put them on the right scent. They lay all the evidence before me, and I am generally able, by the help of my knowledge of history of crime, to set them straight. There's strong family resemblance about misdeeds, and you have all the details of 1,000 at your finger ends. It is odds that you can't unravel the 1,001st. Lestrade is a well-known detective. He got himself into a fog recently over a forgery case, and that was what brought him over here." "And the other people?" "They are mostly sent on private inquiring agencies. They are all people who are in trouble about something, and want a little enlightening. I listen to their stories, and they listen to my comments, and then I pocket my fee." "But do you mean to say," I asked, "that without leaving your room you can unravel some knot which other men can make nothing of, although they have seen every detail for themselves?" "Oh, quite so. I have a kind of intuition that way. Now and again a case turns up which is a little more complex, and then I have to bustle about and see things with my own eyes. I've seen a lot of special knowledge which I apply to the problem, which facilitates matters wonderfully. Those rules of deduction laid down in the article, which roused your scorn, are invaluable to me in practical work. Observation with me is second nature. You appeared to be surprised when I told you on our first meeting that you had come from Afghanistan." "You were told, no doubt." "Oh, nothing of the sort. I knew you came from Afghanistan. From long habit the train of thoughts ran so swiftly through my mind that I arrived at the conclusion without being conscious of the intermediate steps. There were such steps, however. The train of reasoning ran. Here's a gentleman of a medical type, but with the air of a military man. Clearly an army doctor, then. He has just come from the tropics, for his face is dark, and is not that the natural tint of his skin, for his wrists are fair. He has undergone hardship and sickness, as his haggard face says clearly. His left arm has been injured. He holds it in a stiff, unnatural manner. Where the topics could be of an English army doctor, which had seen hardship and got his arm wounded? Clearly in Afghanistan. The whole train of thought did not occupy a second, and then I remarked that you came from Afghanistan, and you were astonished." "It is simple enough as you explain it," I said, smiling. "You remind me of Edgar Allan Poe's Dupin. I have no idea how such individuals did exist outside of stories." Sherlock Holmes rose and lit his pipe. "No doubt you think you compliment me in comparing me to Dupin," he observed. "Now, in my opinion, Dupin was a very inferior fellow. The tricks of his breaking in on his friends' thoughts with an apropos remark after a quarter of an hour's silence is really very showy and superficial. He had some analytical genius, no doubt, but he was no means a phenomenon such as Poe appeared to imagine." "Have you read Gabreau's work?" I asked. "Does Lecoq come up in your idea of a detective?" Sherlock Holmes sniffed sardonically. "Lecoq was a miserable bungler," he said in an angry voice. "He had only one thing to recommend to him, and that was his energy. That book made me positively ill. The question of how to identify an unknown prisoner, I could have done it in 24 hours. Lecoq took 6 months or so. He might have made a textbook for detectives, to teach them on what to avoid. I feel rather indignant at having 2 characters whom I had admired treated in that cavalier style, so I walked over to the window and stood out looking into the busy street. This fellow may be very clever, I said to myself, but he certainly is very conceited. There are no crimes, no criminals this day, he said, querulously. What is the use of having brains in our profession? I know, well, that I have it, and in me to make my name famous. No man lives, or has lived, who has brought the same amount of study of the natural talent to the detection of crime which I have done. And what is the result? There is no crime to detect, or at most some bungling villainy with a motive so transparent that even a Scotland Yard official can see through it. I was still annoyed at his tempestuous style of conversation, and I thought it best to change the topic. "I wonder what that fellow is looking for?" I asked, pointing at the stalwart and plainly dressed individual who was walking slowly down the other side of the street, looking anxiously at the numbers. He had a large blue envelope in his hand, and was evidently the bearer of a message. "You mean the retired sergeant of Marines?" Sherlock Holmes said. "Brag and bounce," I thought to myself. "He knows that I cannot verify his guess." The thought had hardly passed through my mind when the man whom we were watching caught sight of the number on our door and ran rapidly across the roadway. We heard a loud knock and a deep voice below, and heavy steps ascending the stairs. "For Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he said, stepping into the room and handing my friend the letter. Here was an opportunity of taking conceit out of him. His little thought of this when he made that random shot. "May I ask, lad," I said to him, in the blandest of voice, "what your trade may be?" "Commissionaire," he said. "Uniform away for repairs." "And you were?" I said, in a slightly malicious glance at my companion. "Sergeant, sir. Royal Marine Light Infantry." No answer? Right, sir. And he clicked his heels together, raised his hand in a salute, and was gone.